Thank you for tuning in and checking out Unlucky, a Memoir. My name is Kat. Everyone has a story. This one just happens to be mine. So where I left off last week was telling the story about what happened with me and the doctor as I tried checking myself in on a 72-hour hold. And she didn't believe me and told me I was just looking for a warm place to stay. I was just a homeless drug addict to her. I remember telling her I had $200 in cash in my pocket, $100 on a credit card, and two $25 Visa gift cards. If I wanted a warm place to stay, I'd go and get one. Needless to say, they threw me out in the morning. They let me stay overnight. And when I was leaving there, the thought in my mind was, I'm going to have to show her. I'm going to take all the money I have, go find one of the people I've seen sitting outside the night before, getting high, nodded out, and have one of them help me go get what I need. I was going to get as much as I could with what I had, inject it into my arm, and end it all. I had finally made the decision that I was beyond hopeless, that I was at the end of my road, and this was it. I kept walking. It was really cold. It was March. And started realizing there was nobody outside anymore. Everybody had found a place to hole up, tent, corner somewhere. So I couldn't find anyone. I remember walking down Broad Street and just thinking to myself, this is the worst mistake I've ever made. At least back home, back east, I would have died inside. Needless to say, I continued walking and trying to figure out a way to do this. Fortunately, the evening before, talking to my brother, frustratedly, I asked him to be my emergency contact, and he agreed. And thank God for that. I continued walking down Broad, and I'd walked quite a while. I didn't realize how long I'd been walking when all of a sudden I got a message on my phone. And it was a message from my brother letting me know that the hospital had called and let him know that they had thrown me out. Even though the night before talking to the doctor, she said, I don't even know if I believe you have a brother. Well, he texted me, and I looked at the text, and it said the hospital called and told me they threw you out. Do me a favor and go check in at the Stout Street Clinic. It's a free clinic in downtown Denver. And at this point, I'd made the decision that it was over. I was going to end it. I looked at that phone and realized that now I had another decision to make. Because obviously, I still had people who cared about me, cared enough to reach out and be concerned. So as I'm contemplating this, looking down at my phone, I remember looking up from my phone and looking to the street sign on the corner. And I was on the corner of Stout and Broad. It's about a block and a half from that clinic. I remember throwing my hands up, looking up, and just going, I get it, God, I get it. It's not my time. It can't be any more obvious. So fortunately for me, that was a turning point. And later on, I'd come to realize that that was a very integral and important moment for me, and ended up solidifying my faith that it wasn't my time. So I decided to forego the original plan and take some advice. I walked that block and a half down and sat outside the clinic for maybe an hour or so until they opened their doors. And I remember sitting around. There's a bunch of people sitting around. In hindsight, I probably could ask any one of them to help me find some drugs, but I didn't. I remember them opening the doors, and everybody started filing inside. And when I got to the door, I remember the woman at the door asking me, are you a client here? And I said, no, I've only been here a couple of days. She said, unfortunately, we're not accepting new clients. My face must have spoke volumes, because she followed up with a second question. she asked me what's going on. And so I explained the previous evening and what happened at the hospital. And she said, "Oh, mental health, we'll get you right in." So the fact that she had that follow-up question was so important, because she, like the doctor, could have had stigma and dealt with me in a different way. And as soon as I said I wasn't a client, she said, "Well, sorry." And that would have been the end of it. Because I'm sure on a day in, day out basis, she deals with people that try her patience, test her nerves. And it's very easy to get numb to it in a situation like that and just not care. But the fact that she cared enough to follow up with that question was very important. They got me in and got me set up with a therapist who I saw within the hour and who I still see to this day. And it's been a really big part of my recovery. They did their best and got me onto the MAT clinic, medically assisted treatment for opioid use. And it's one thing my therapist told me that really changed a lot for me. She asked me what I'd been diagnosed with. And I said, "Well, an opiate use disorder." And she said, "You've been misdiagnosed." And I said, "How so?" She explained that I have childhood trauma, PTSD. Those led to depression, which in turn led to the opiate use disorder. And what that did for me, it put space between me and that diagnosis. Because for years, that diagnosis was who I was. It was my identity. And to finally have a little space from it, it felt like I had a little space to do what I needed to do. It no longer defined me. So I get on the MAT clinic and they prescribe me Suboxone. And now it's been a couple of days since I'd gotten high. And I waited another day, and so it'd been well over 2-3 days since I had last used. And I attempted to start taking the Suboxone and immediately started not feeling well, and then headed back over to what they call Jesus Saves, which is a Denver Rescue Mission shelter and day shelter. And I knew it because back home we had the same neon sign outside of our Allentown Rescue Mission. So I was there in the day shelter and kept getting deeper and deeper into precipitated withdrawals until I was laying on the floor, curled up in fetal position, under a sink in the bathroom, because you weren't allowed to lay down in there in the day shelter. And I was just at a really low point, and again, starting to question why was I doing this? And again, someone intervened, and it was one of the techs there that kept an eye on things, and he came in and saw what was going on, and he was in recovery himself, so he ended up calling an ambulance, and that ambulance came, and the person in the ambulance wasn't very kind, but that's another story for another day. They get me back to the hospital that I had just gotten thrown out of and take me into the emergency room. And I'm sitting back there waiting to be seen, feeling horrible, can't move. And the first doctor comes in and explains that we're just going to give you more Suboxone, and over the next so many hours, it'll get better. And then another doctor had come in who I believe was higher up in charge, whatever. And he said, "I don't think that's a good idea. He already has a bad taste in his mouth from this experience. Let's go a different route." And he ended up giving me IV opiates, strong ones, to push the naloxone off of my opiate receptors, and just enough to get me out of precipitated withdrawal and into just not feeling well. So they did that for a couple hours, and then they discharged me with the plan of me coming back and going on to the methadone clinic the next day. I realized how late it was, and the shelter you can only go into up until a certain time. It was past that time. I came later to find out that I could have went back with a note from the hospital, and they would have got me back in. Regardless, I sat. There was an area between two automated doors with some seating, and that's where I spent my night. And that was a cold night, and every time somebody came in from the outside door, it was the entrance to the ER, so there was a lot of traffic. Every time somebody came in, those doors would open and cold blasts of wind would come in. And when you're sick from withdrawal with opiates, you're very sensitive to the temperatures. Wasn't allowed to lay down in there, had to remain seated the whole night. If you lay down, one of the security guards would come out and yell at you and tell you if you do it, you're going to get thrown out. I sat there, and then I look outside and I realized it started snowing. There was another gentleman in the waiting room across from me, and I had hit a point of weakness and asked him if he could find me drugs. And he agreed and said, "Come on, we'll go get them." And it was a real battle, a war in my head about going or not going. I get up and start walking out with him. And at that time, another gentleman comes walking in, a younger guy. And I realized it's snowing a lot harder. And I talked to this other guy, and he says, "Don't even bother." He said, "Nobody's going to be out selling anything anyway. It's going to be a wasted trip." And he was also suffering from addiction at the time, active addiction. So I just felt this sense of just like give up. I went back and sat down and suffered through it. That next morning, because the day shelter opens like 6 a.m., I think. And so I got my way back over there and went in, and then made it back up to the clinic later that day and got prescribed methadone. And it was a low dose. And I proceeded over the next few weeks, coming down 5 milligrams every few days until I was completely off. In that time, I had been moved from that day shelter to a permanent bed at another shelter that they run, and continued to detox and continued to do whatever I needed to do. And part of that was going to a Bible study at the shelter, and that's where I met Chaplain Josh. And we got along really well. And I remember him telling me, "Why don't you go check out this program we offer? It's called the New Life Program. It's 9 to 12 months. And that's when I said, "Hey, I'm not going in for 9 to 12 months. Be happy I'm coming to your Bible study." And he let go of it. He stopped pushing it. But I remember going to look into housing through my case manager at Stout Street. And I remember she said, "All right, let's submit all this stuff, but it's going to be at least 12 months until you hear something about housing." I remember hearing Chaplain Josh's voice in my head saying 9 to 12 months. And I said, maybe I can just go hide out there for a while and wait till I get housing. And I remember going back and telling him I'd do it. He was ecstatic. He was so happy that I decided to do it. I filled the paperwork out and submitted it. Had an interview with them down at Jesus Saves, where they just interview to see if you're fit for the program. And it was during the eclipse. I remember that because I remember being in an office in this inside of the building where there's no windows, and I missed it completely. But I remember getting the note at the shelter saying I was accepted. And I was talking with a friend of mine, and I remember telling him that I think this might be the best decision I've ever made coming to Colorado. And mind you, this is about a month apart from the time I said this might be the worst decision I've ever made in my life. I was wanting to take my life. So the point in saying that is time and space are very important. Emotions and my heart will lie to me. Emotions are very reactive. I've done my best to learn how to act on a feeling instead of react to an emotion. If I would have reacted to that emotion that day, nothing could have got better. It could have only gotten, it would have been over. And I wouldn't have the life I live today if I just acted on that emotion and taken my life. So instead, a month later, I'm best decision I've ever made in my life. And it turns out to be trending in that direction. It's still going that way. I'm grateful for the life I have today. And with that, I'm going to wrap it up for this week and continue on next week. And I want to thank you all. I appreciate each and everybody for coming on this journey with me and following along. Catch y'all next week.